thousands are attending hostage release rallies across Israel. Hamas's intentions with the hostages and how many are still alive remains unclear, but the cries for immediate release are ramping up every day.
Please don't look at the other way. Sorry. It's not an issue of the Israelis or not an issue of the Jews. It's a humanitarian issue that should be concerned as such.
Negotiations are ongoing, a delicate process, of course, when dealing with a terror group. So let's bring in hostage negotiator Dr. Gershon Baskin, Middle East Director of the International Communities Organization. Dr. Baskin, thank you so much for giving us some of your time. You certainly understand how delicate these situations are. How significant are Jake Sullivan's comments over the weekend? How does not knowing if the hostages are alive, if the hostages are dead, change how the negotiations proceed?
I don't think it changes how the negotiations proceed. The number is quite large, 239 according to the Israeli count, and we don't know what their well-being is, how many of them are alive, how many of them are injured. There are elderly people there who need medication. There were infants who were taken as hostage. The negotiations are carried out with the assumption that they are all alive and that Hamas is responsible for their well-being. That is the only way that negotiations can be carried out until the International Red Cross is able to have access to the hostages and to prepare a full report on the names of all those people and what their conditions are. And Hamas does not agree to the Red Cross visiting the hostages.
And obviously this is a war, and all of the implications that come with that. We know that the airstrikes are continuing. Of course, the U.S. has no way to confirm that, what Hamas claims, which is that Israeli airstrikes have killed a number of hostages. But is it likely that at least some deaths have occurred?
It's entirely possible. There was massive bombing of the Gaza Strip, and hostages are presumably kept underground or in houses that could have been attacked with Israeli bombs. We don't know, but we should take everything that's said around the hostage issue with a large grain of salt. We should understand it's all part of the psychological warfare. Each side makes statements that are aimed at putting pressure on the other side. And basically what we should understand is when there will be an agreement, the officials on all sides will announce the agreement. And everything else is rumor and noise aimed at trying to influence the negotiations themselves.
And Doctor, we brought you on here because you are a hostage negotiator. You have done these type of delicate talks. You know what is involved. So what is likely going on behind the scenes when it comes to getting these hostages freed, but not just freed safely, freed alive?
Right. My understanding is that what they're working on is the humanitarian release of the women, children, and elderly. That's what I understand from the conversations I've had with people who are directly involved. There's a thought that we need to build confidence before a larger deal that can be negotiated. But even if it's just the women, the children, and the elderly, it's probably about half of the hostages, at least, that are being held. I understand that Hamas is wanting to do the release in several packages of releases of hostages, where the Israelis are definitely pushing to have it done in one time. Hamas is demanding a ceasefire that take place for 3 to 5 days, maybe longer, during which time they will release hostages. Any ceasefire on the part of Israel requires not only stopping the shooting, but a redeployment of forces, because they would be exposed and sitting ducks, basically, where they're positioned right now in the city of Gaza. So it would require time to implement a ceasefire for Israel to withdraw to more secure positions. And then we need to see if Hamas is going to honor the ceasefire as well as release hostages.
And my last question for you, obviously we were talking about this, so there is still a focus on the hostages, but do you think enough attention is still being paid to the fact that there are hundreds? I mean, at last count, it was approximately 239 people who are still missing and assumed taken hostage.
I think that the attention in Israeli society is growing. The hostage families are beginning a 4-day march tomorrow from Tel Aviv up to Jerusalem to the Israeli parliament, where they will demand to meet with all the parliamentarians and members of the government. There's no doubt that public opinion is turning in favor of the hostages and the demand to the Israeli government to bring them back. But I think that time is also running out, because there's a ticking clock on the war and what Israel needs to achieve in the war of dismantling Hamas's ability to govern and threaten Israel. And these two goals of bringing the hostages back and completing the military mission are somewhat in conflict with each other. There will be a time when Israel will have exhausted all the possibilities of negotiations and decide that it has to pick up the speed of the war machine of going further south in the Gaza Strip and clearing out the hospitals where they believe that command centers are located and entering the tunnels, which are hundreds of kilometers of tunnels underneath Gaza where the Hamas fighters are, and the leaders of Hamas are probably hiding, and Israel will seek them out.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.